Hey everyone, it's your average chess player here. Today we are going to look at this game between Lombardi and Fischer with the main focus on middle game to end game transition. So this is how the video is going to be. We're going to look at 3 to 4 critical positions. We're just going to jump to those positions, maybe let them play out a bit, but just mainly focus on what plans that Fischer as black in the game had and what moves he found and why those moves work. And we'll also try to pause the video along the way and try to guess the moves for ourselves based on the plans we discussed. So just a nice thought exercise, you could say. I will leave the link to the full game in the description. So if you want to check out the full game on what are all the moves that were played, feel free to do that. So let's get started. So I'm going to jump to the first critical position in this video, which is here. So this is move 14. White just played rook c1, and somewhere in between in the game, white chose to play knight c2 instead of bishop e2 and castles. So you could check that out. But we reached this position. So this is the first critical position because Fischer played a nice move here, which kind of forced a series of exchanges where black got the upper hand. If I were to play a move in this position, I would probably play rook a c8. Nothing wrong with the move, but it doesn't do anything to the position like what Fischer played. So you can pause the video here and try to really find the full sequence, because if you don't see the full sequence, then just playing this first move might be wrong. You might not play that in a game. So pause the video, try to find the move. The move that Fischer played here was knight to b4. He makes use of the fact that there's a discovered attack on the queen, so black has to do something about it. Either you move the queen to back to e2, in which case you lose the pawn on a2, and it leads to this series of kind of forced moves where both sides exchange their queenside pawns, but because the white king is stuck in the center, black can kind of go for checkmate. So this is already lost. So the position can crumble quite fast for white here. But we'll go back to the game position right here. Here white continued with knight takes b4. So we have right now temporarily given up the knight, but now we get an exchange back. We sacrifice the queen temporarily because we do have an attack on the queen here. So takes and knight d5. So we reach this position where the black, the light squared bishop of black and the dark squared bishop both are under attack, right? And in the book that I read this, the annotation from Fischer, he said like white missed black's next move, and that's why white went through with this variation of moves. And the move that black has here is an intermediate move, which is a check on h4. And with this check, g3, bishop f1, king f1, and bishop d8, black reaches this kind of like a pre-endgame, I would say. I would still call this middle game because there are more pieces, but reaches this position. So Fischer reaches this position, and let's pause here and understand what is happening. So somewhere in the game, black sacrificed a pawn. That's why black is pawn down before the knight b4 shenanigans. And we saw the variation where we just now ended up with an exchange up as black. So we are in this position where we're an exchange up, we're a pawn down. We have these two open files which we could occupy with our rook. White's rook is not active, might require 2 moves to get the rook into the game. The bishop can get into the game in 1 move or maybe 2 moves depending on what black wants to do with b3 and bishop b2 or bishop e3. This knight is probably the biggest problem that black has in this position, because this knight is beautifully positioned on d5. It is an octopus knight for sure. Good outpost on d5. What is better is this is a light square and we have a dark squared bishop. We need to figure out how to exchange this knight for the bishop so that we get a clear-cut advantage here. So that is kind of the plan we need to look for. How do we dislodge this knight? Because we don't want to give up our rook for this knight. then we'll be just a pawn down in a way, at least in this position. So that is kind of an idea. That's the imbalance there. Exchanging this bishop for this one will be good, but it depends on the position. But right now, this knight is not tolerable. So we need to figure out what to do. White plays bishop d2, rook c8, controlling the open file, also threatening rook c2 for the attack on 7th rank. White plays bishop c3, and we reach another critical position. So again, pause the video and remember our plan, or remember what we noticed is that this knight is a menace and we need to dislodge it. So with that in mind, what is a move that you would play in this position? Fischer here played f5. It's a great move because we are threatening fe4 immediately, disconnecting the pawns from the knight. This knight is going to become weak. You cannot take back because there is a pin. If you play something like king e2, we'll play rook e8 with the same idea, and the game goes on. But it is definitely, this is a completely different game. This wasn't played in the actual game. The actual game, e5 was played first. So king e2 is an alternative. E5 was what was played in the game, and Fischer has successfully disconnected the knight from the pawn. So this knight is now prone to attack, and which is what it does. Rook c5, attacking this knight, and white plays knight b4. Another option was knight f4, but knight b4 was what was played in the game, so we'll stick to that. And Fischer gets what he has wanted in this position, which is bishop a5, to chase this knight, exchange it for the bishop, so you reach a better endgame. A better endgame with the two rooks versus a rook and a bishop. Here, white played a3 in the game. Another alternative is knight d3, in which case rook d5, and after bishop a5, you have an option to take either of these pieces. And both of those moves would result in an endgame where black is in exchange up, and black has a active rooks in the position and clean up these pawns. They are not completely concrete, I would say. In terms of you would for example, you would take this position, and then from here you have to play a lot of moves to convert this endgame. So it's not straightforward, but at the same time, this is theoretically completely winning. So going back, a3 was what was played in the game. Bishop b4. Here, bishop b4 can be played. A b4 what was played in the game. Bishop b4 would result in rook c1, king g2, takes, and then let's say rook c8. And then a sequence of moves like this, but now again, theoretically winning. Black has an exchange for this bishop, can probably try to clean up this pawn, and then evacuate this bishop, exchange a few more pawns, and then eventually sacrifice this rook for this bishop and try to push the pawns on queen set. So there are a lot of plans depending on how white plays this position. Again, this wasn't played in the game. I just wanted to show you different ways that this game could have transpired into an endgame, but they're all still theoretically winning, I would say. So a b4 was what was played, and we have rook d5, king e2, and king f7. Now, this is not a critical position, but I also wanted to kind of talk about king f7. It does look like black is trying to get an active king on the board because the king is the only piece that is not active right now, and white also moved its king. But the other reason I could see why king f7 is a move here is to next play king e6. And king e6, again, it's not just an active king move, but it also blockades this pawn. And what do we achieve with that? This bishop is kind of imprisoned by its own pawns at that point. Already, these two pawns are restricting the bishop's movement. So right now, it's just like a big pawn in the position. And with this pawn being blockaded, this bishop, it cannot move. It has to go here and then come here to even make itself useful in the game. And if you ever have to protect this pawn, you have to maybe play f4. And if you have to play f4, then the bishop is even worse. And you can maybe come to c5. I can push you away. So it's a bunch of things that will happen, and this bishop will not have a good time. So After h4, again, white is just trying to grab some space because g5 here would restrict white further. And king e6, this bishop is now officially imprisoned, so not much can be done there. King e3, again, just an active king move. Rook c8, rook d8 is also fine, but rook c8 is just to put on the semi-open file. Rook g1 with the idea of g4, rook c4. I think this is a waiting move. I did not get why rook c4 is played here. I'm still not sure what I would play here. I saw an idea here. I'll show you the idea, but that is what kind of happened in the game. Let's just stick with the game's moves so that I don't ruin the surprise for you. So rook c4 and white plays rook e1. So we reached probably the last critical position in this game. So here, like, you need to see what black has and what is the advantage black has, which is the being exchange up. And more often than not, you would have to kind of trade one advantage for another in a chess game. This is something I struggle with, which is to trade advantages where you have a good advantage, but you then give that up. Try to get another advantage. Could be a long-term one, like a positional advantage, which will give you returns in the long run, or it could just be a simple, like, simplified version of your advantage so that you can make more accurate moves. So those are usually how it happens. And here, Fischer goes for it. He simplifies the game. So you can pause the video, try to find what is the, you could say, the middle game to end game transition that Fischer found out, which just simplified the whole position and had like a concrete win for black. So go ahead and pause the video and try that. The move that was played is just rook takes c3. I saw the same idea here after rook g1. I wanted to play that, but it doesn't work in that position. But it works here because after rook takes e5, the rook was on g1, I wouldn't get to exchange the rooks. But with the rook on e1, after king d2, this exchange happens. And once this happens, Fischer just plays king d5 and king c4. And now this white king has limited squares to protect this pawn from, and also has to defend d3 and cannot step away from the position. If d3 is given up in an unfavorable way, black can just clean up all these pawns. Yeah. So now from here on, this is a winning endgame because here on, black is going to waste moves, white is going to waste moves to keep the white king here, and black would just want to put the white side on zugzwang. So h5, b6, king c2, all these moves are just to put white in a zugzwang, and eventually we reach this position after a4 where black has successfully achieved that. If you play in the game, king a3 was played. If you play king c2, just push this pawn and then I take this. You have to now, you have to focus on this pawn now. I can just go and take here. And if you, in the game, king a3 was played, takes after king d4, king b4, and king e3. I can now take the pawn on f3 in the next move, king g2, and queen the f pawn. And that is the game. It's a really nice game, really instructive in terms of what happened. I'll just recap just the critical position. I would say the last one. Everything else is just there. So rook c3, and this is how, like, you have to really visualize the fact that, okay, so I have two passed pawns here. My king is going to be active. I'm going to have the, also, like, in a way, he has the opposition here, right? And you have to see that, okay, white is gonna run out of moves, and then I can exchange these pawns and get a passed pawn and distract the white king and then win the game. So yeah, that is the game. This is the first time I'm making this kind of content on this channel with middle game and end game transition. So if you guys have any comments on the format or feedback on what can be different, please comment. I read through all the comments and I can definitely make this better. If you guys like the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. I also make content on end games. Catch you guys in the next one.